Now, if we look around us, you say to yourselves, well, what is the biggest problem we face? Well, we all have our own choices. I think myself that the biggest problem we face is none of the obvious things. It is human multiplication. Do you know there are 10,000 more new people in the world every hour, and there are almost 8 million more people every year. And I don't think that is a good example of the kind of problem that has not been recognized by most people. Maybe they don't want to upset the Pope, maybe they don't want to do damage to some little constituency somewhere, but I think we have to face the fact that when you look at the world's problems at the moment, it's very hard to get away from the fact that that is the really key issue for the future. And that also chimes with the fact that we may be entering, or perhaps have entered, a new geological epoch. Some of you know about geology, but you have the Pleistocene ice ages, which came to an end about 11,700 years ago. Since then, between 11,700 years ago and about, let's say, 1750, you have what is called the Holocene, which is the present warm period that we're all used to, and which most people think is just going to go on forever. But recently, people have begun to realize the degree to which humans are changing the face of the earth. And so there are proposals at the moment for what is going to be called, what is already called, the Anthropocene, or that epoch of the Earth's history when humans change the surface of the Earth. And our small animal species is at the moment not only multiplying, but it's also damaging the Earth, the surface of the Earth, its land, its seas, and its atmosphere in quite alarming ways. And that too, people are not so far willing, I don't think, to recognize. It's very interesting if you look at the Anthropocene. If you count the Anthropocene as this geological epoch that began 250 years ago with the Industrial Revolution, which began in this country, then you see everything beginning to change at an accelerated rate. I was the other day at a conference at the Royal Society when we tried to make comparisons with the changes that we have brought about in those 250 years and the changes that we're bringing about every day at the moment. There's no real analogy because it's all happening much quicker. The big warmings of the past, the catastrophes of the past, don't really measure up to what we're doing to the Earth at the moment. And you must, I think, focus very clearly on the quality of the soils and its ability to produce the food that we need, the quality of the seas and the fish in it, and the gradual acidification of the great coral reefs, which have been a great source of life throughout all recorded history. And indeed, as I said, the problems of the air, where we are putting greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere at an unprecedented rate. When I say unprecedented, I'm not saying that the Earth hasn't had this volume of greenhouse gases in it before. What it hasn't had is this measure of acceleration taking place, and how every year we are making all these differences, because in the past, when these things have happened, they've happened relatively slowly over a period of perhaps thousands of years, or in the event of some natural disaster like a hit from space, then it is fairly quick. But on the whole, the changes that have taken place in the past, in the Earth's sea, the Earth's soils, and the Earth's air, have all been pretty slow. The kind of picture I just painted you is one that is not accepted by a number of people. And when you see the frenzied character of their objections, you're right to be skeptical about their motives. It's like the people who resist climate change and say it's all nonsense, it's all been put on by a lot of crazy academics who want research funding. And you get the kind of what are called the naysayers. I won't call them skeptics, because skeptics, all scientists should be skeptics. The naysayers are the people who really try and destroy and disqualify and dishonor those who are doing the kind of things that Earth Champions, among other organizations, is now, well, the kind of things that they're now trying to do. It's quite interesting to see the degree of it. The one particular one that always amuses me is that one of the stories is that the amount of human pollution of the atmosphere, the amount of carbon dioxide we put in the atmosphere, is not caused by humans, it's caused by volcanoes and other things. This is rubbish. Recently somebody's done a little study of the whole thing, in which they show that the whole of the pollution produced by volcanoes, roughly on an average in a period of time, is about the same amount as the human emissions from Florida by itself in the whole world. We are changing the Earth's atmosphere, we're changing the Earth's seas, and we're changing the surface of the land. Now you may say, well, what is it? How are we going to do something about this? How are we going to bring in these factors to the minds of policymakers? Well, it's difficult, because policymakers work on fairly short timescales. They've got to be re-elected, they want to be popular, they know that most people may take this in intellectually, but they're not actually in a position to say, well, we must do something, especially if it's a little bit inconvenient, or it means adding to costs, or it means making worse the economic crisis to which I referred at the beginning. So you have quite a problem in getting that message across to politicians. But politicians tend to respond to three things. They respond, first of all, to real leadership, people coming forward and making it quite clear what has happened and what needs to be done. So you get leadership from above. The second thing you've got is pressure from below. That is to say, when ordinary citizens begin to say, this is intolerable, it comes through non-governmental organizations, it's manifest when you have elections, but the popular feeling is a very important factor, and I make it the second factor. And I think that, of course, is where Earth Champions comes in. And the third factor is what I call benign or not so malign catastrophes. When something goes visibly wrong, attributably wrong, then you can say, well, it's because we did this that this has happened. Of course, it's very difficult to show, not least because in the case of climate, which, as you've heard, is something I'm particularly interested in, the process is slow. The Earth may be warming, but it's not obvious to most people that it's warming. What I think is obvious to most people is that we have at the moment a measure of destabilization of climate. In other words, what used to be like this is now like that. And one of the things that's very interesting, for example, are the predictions of a migration from a drying up Mediterranean, north and south, a migration northwards, so that more and more people will be moving into Scandinavia and Germany and parts of northern Britain, because the conditions to the south will be less good, and it needs to be much drier. So you have that sort of benign catastrophes when you can recognize the catastrophe in time and draw the right conclusions from it. And that is something which is quite difficult to do. Now, Earth Champions is about individuals. What individuals can do by their example, how they fit into the second of my categories of the kind of pressure on those who have to take decisions because it becomes clear that they have to do so. And the jump between individual initiatives, individual virtue, individual achievement, and changes in the global system is a very big jump. But it's a very effective jump if you can make it. And that, I think, is quite important, because in different parts of the world, we've already seen that Earth Champions can exercise a substantial degree of difference. And it's just jumping from, as I say, the local to the global.